Let me close with this true story. Just like Jesus used a true story in his parable based on fact that actually happened historically, I'd like to share a quick true story too to kind of drive home this point. There's a story of an ailing 52-year-old who had been wheelchair-bound due to her illness for a few years. She had become very isolated and very depressed. The woman's nephew recommended a doctor that he was seeing that would soon be traveling to Milwaukee for a speaking engagement and asked if he'd be willing to call on his beloved aunt who lived there, and Dr. Erickson agreed. When Dr. Erickson arrived, the aunt connected with him over their shared disabilities. They both had disabilities. And she invited him in and showed him around the house. It was a lonely, worn-out house. The drapes were all drawn. It was very dark, gloomy, and dusty. And she began to tell him about her life. See, she said that she used to have a very active life. She said that she believed in the gospel and was a Christian and was very active in her church family. But not since her suffering began. She had someone who wanted to help her go to church by taking her wheelchair, but it was just a bother, so she wouldn't go. As she gave the tour, she saved the best part of her house for the last, as she came to the greenhouse attached to the back. This is where she spent most of her time. She had kind of a green thumb. Dr. Erickson saw these very small cuttings sitting there, and he asked about them. See, he grew up on a farm, and he knew the cuttings are actually pretty difficult to grow. She agreed with that and stated that she has this talent. They were African violets, and she had been growing them for years. The doctor was pretty impressed. That's when he turned to her, and he said, "Your nephew is worried about you." She said, "I know." He said, "He thinks you're depressed." She said, "I've been depressed for a few years." The doctor said, "I don't think that's actually the problem, though." She said, "You don't?" He said, "No. I think the problem is that you have not been a very good Christian." She was offended, taken back. But as he explained himself, it started to make sense, and she calmed down. He said, "You have this faith in God, a talent, and this time on your hands. What I recommend is that you get your church newsletter and the membership list from your church, and anytime you see a happy event or anything like a sad event going on in anybody's life, you take a potted cuttings to them." She agreed that she may have been too wrapped up in herself since she had become ill and started suffering, and she agreed that she was not really being very faithful in her Christian duty, so she agreed to do this tiny little thing. That was in the 1950s. Fast forward to 1977, and Dr. Erickson is telling this story to Bill O'Hanlon. As he's telling this story, the doctor goes over to the bookcase and pulls out a scrapbook. Inside was a newspaper clipping from an obituary from the Milwaukee newspaper that read, "African Violet Queen of Milwaukee mourned by thousands." She had died 11 years after that meeting, and they could not fit in the church all the people who came to her funeral and were influenced in their walk with God. He had challenged her to use her resources to draw closer to God, to others through the church as it reached out into the whole city. And she had no idea the reach, and she had no idea what God was doing with that. But we know this isn't about African violets, is it? This is about what Christ has done for us and how we want to just say thank you. It's how we see our life. See, we have been given all that we need for life and godliness. It is in the gospel of Jesus Christ. That gospel changes our heart. Changes everything. And I wonder, what do you have given by God to use for Him? It is all His. May we all be all in. He is worth it.